The mansion was unusually quiet that afternoon, the kind of silence that felt polished, expensive, and heavy, like the marble floors beneath the maid's bare feet. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, spilling across velvet sofas and gold-trimmed tables, making the entire house glow as if it were holding its breath. She moved slowly from room to room, a soft cloth in her hand, wiping away dust that barely had time to settle. As she worked, she hummed under her breath, an old tune from her village, one her mother used to sing while washing clothes by the river. The melody was gentle, comforting, a small reminder of a simpler life far away from this grand city mansion. The chandeliers above her sparkled faintly as they swayed, reacting to her movement. Every object here screamed wealth, polished wood, imported paintings, the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. None of it truly belonged to her. She was just passing through, day after day, invisible unless something went wrong. She paused near the hallway leading to the west wing. Her humming faded. Her eyes drifted, almost unwillingly, toward a shadowed corner near the study door. Her fingers tightened around the cloth. For a moment, she simply stood there, listening, to the ticking of the antique clock, to the distant hum of the city outside, to her own heartbeat, suddenly louder than it should have been. Not today, she whispered to herself, barely audible. Please, not today. She forced herself to breathe and continued dusting, though her movements were no longer relaxed. Every sound now felt sharper, the faint creak of wood, the soft brush of fabric against glass. She glanced back again at that hidden corner, her face betraying a flicker of fear she couldn't quite hide. The maid told herself she was being foolish. The master of the house never came home this early. Never. His schedule was predictable, precise, meetings, flights, dinners that stretched long into the night. This afternoon was supposed to be safe. Quiet. Ordinary. Yet something felt off. Outside, a car horn echoed faintly from the street below. She froze, cloth midair. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and for a split second, the entire mansion seemed to lean in with her, listening. At that moment, if you're watching this story and feeling the suspense, make sure to hit the subscribe button and share this video with friends, so you don't miss what happens next. She shook her head gently, as if to chase the thought away. Focus, she murmured, steadying herself. Just finish cleaning. Still, as she resumed her work, her gaze kept drifting toward the entrance hall, and the unease in her chest refused to settle. The calm of the afternoon was thinning, stretching, about to snap. She didn't know it yet, but this silence was only the beginning. The sound came without warning. A low, mechanical hum, followed by the unmistakable crunch of tires against gravel. The maid's hand froze in midair, the silver tray trembling slightly between her fingers. For a heartbeat, she told herself it was nothing. Another car passing by. Another echo from the busy city streets below the hill. Then she heard it. The sharp electronic beep of the front gate unlocking. Her breath caught in her throat. No, 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 she whispered, barely moving her lips. From the tall windows of the sitting room, she saw it clearly now, a sleek black car pulling into the driveway, its surface reflecting the afternoon sun. The vehicle rolled to a smooth stop, precise and controlled, just like the man who owned it. The millionaire was home. Her heart began to pound so hard she was certain it would betray her. He was never home at this hour. Never. His world ran on schedules and assistants, on boardrooms and private flights. This house was supposed to be empty, except for her. She turned quickly, eyes darting around the room. The tray in her hand suddenly felt too heavy. Her gaze flicked toward the hallway, then toward the corner she had tried so hard not to look at earlier. Panic flooded her chest. Oh God, she murmured. What do I do now? The sound of the car door closing echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. Footsteps followed, firm, confident, unhurried, approaching the front entrance. She could almost picture him already, tailored suit, phone in hand, mind still wrapped around deals worth more than her entire lifetime of earnings. She swallowed hard and placed the tray down quietly, as if sound itself had become dangerous. Her fingers moved fast now, almost clumsy, as she rushed toward the hallway. The front door opened. The millionaire stepped inside, loosening his tie, his expression unreadable but tired. He didn't look around. He never did. To him, the house existed to serve, not to surprise. Strange, he muttered to himself. I thought I'd be alone. The maid pressed herself against the wall, barely daring to breathe. Her chest burned with the effort of staying silent. She could hear the soft tap of his shoes against marble, each step closing the distance between him and the truth she wasn't ready to face. She glanced once more toward the place she needed to hide, and whispered, voice shaking but firm. Stay quiet. Please. As his footsteps grew closer, the urgency turned suffocating. One wrong move. One sound. And everything she had tried to protect would be exposed. The house, once peaceful, now felt like a trap, tight, watching, waiting. And the worst part? He was already inside. The house felt different now, strangely alive, every creak and whisper amplified. The maid's heart pounded like a drum, each beat echoing in her ears, reminding her that a single misstep could ruin everything. She pressed her back against the cool wall, eyes darting from the polished floor to the heavy curtains that swayed faintly in the afternoon breeze. Dust motes danced lazily in the sunbeams, but they seemed almost accusatory, like tiny witnesses to her panic. Stay quiet, just stay quiet, she murmured under her breath, the words barely more than a breath itself. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the cloth in her grip, smoothing it over the gleaming wooden table in the living room, forcing herself to appear calm. Every surface gleamed under her touch, but her mind raced faster than her fingers could move. She took a slow, measured step toward the study, careful not to let her shoes scuff the marble. Outside, the city hummed lazily, a car horn, a distant shout, the faint roar of a motorcycle. All normal sounds, all dangerously loud to someone trying to disappear. Her eyes flicked toward the grand staircase. She could hear the faint echo of footsteps somewhere deeper in the house, the soft shuffle of a man moving with purpose. The maid swallowed hard, her throat dry, and pressed her fingers to her lips. What am I going to do? She whispered to herself, voice barely audible. Her mind flashed to her village, sun-warmed fields, the smell of fresh earth after rain, her mother calling her in from the river to wash clothes. Life there had been simple, predictable. Here, every step felt like walking on a knife's edge. She crouched slightly as she approached the hallway corner, each movement deliberate. Her fingers brushed against the wall, feeling the smooth coldness, grounding herself. One wrong sound, the slightest shuffle of the hem of her apron or the faint creak of floorboards, and he would see. He always noticed. The maid paused, taking a slow breath, and let her eyes adjust to the shadows. In the faint light, she glimpsed the small object she had been hiding, tucked carefully behind the low bookshelf. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain still. Almost there, she whispered, inching closer, her body taut with tension. Every second stretched painfully, anticipation building like the calm before a storm. The mansion seemed to hold its breath with her, silent and waiting, as if it too knew the danger of the next moment. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked. Tick, tick, tick. And she knew that soon, everything would change. Her hands shook slightly as she crouched behind the low bookshelf, the small object pressed tightly against her palm. It wasn't much, just a folded envelope, its paper creased from being handled too many times, but to her, it carried the weight of the world. She couldn't stop herself from remembering how it had come into her possession. Just a week ago, she had been dusting the master's study when the envelope had slipped from a drawer, falling to the floor with a soft thud. She had frozen, knowing she shouldn't touch it, knowing it wasn't hers. But curiosity, or perhaps desperation, had won. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in elegant handwriting, a secret that she didn't fully understand, yet knew could destroy someone, or someone's life, if revealed. Her mind wandered briefly to her village, where life had always been simpler. The rivers were clear, and the morning smelled of wet earth and fresh bread. A misplaced envelope there might have meant a scolding from the village elder, but here, in this vast mansion of marble and glass, one small misstep could ruin everything. She hugged the envelope tighter, feeling the brittle edges through her fingers. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself, voice barely audible. I shouldn't have taken it." The memory of her first night in the mansion came rushing back, the awe she had felt walking under crystal chandeliers, the hush of servants moving like shadows in the hallways, the distant hum of the city outside that seemed to mock her with its wealth and opportunity. Back then, she had promised herself she would keep her head down, do her work, and remain invisible. But now, the envelope made invisibility impossible. Her heart sank as she remembered the conversation she had overheard weeks ago, just snippets, just enough to make her realize the gravity of what she held. The master was planning something important, something that could change lives, and this paper, this small, fragile piece of paper, carried a truth he never intended anyone to see. She pressed it closer to her chest, her knuckles white, and whispered again, more urgently this time, "Stay quiet, just a little longer. Please, just a little longer." The mansion was silent around her, but she felt eyes on her, or maybe it was just her imagination, the paranoia creeping in from days of servitude and fear. Every tick of the ornate clock above the fireplace seemed amplified, counting down to the moment when she would either be caught, or have to make a choice that could change everything. And in that silence, she knew there was no turning back. The mansion had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and silence. Every polished floorboard seemed to groan under the weight of her fear. The maid's heart pounded so violently that she felt it in her throat as she inched along the hallway, eyes fixed on the glimmering watch on her wrist. Each second felt stretched, elastic, as if the house itself were holding its breath. From somewhere deeper in the mansion came the soft, deliberate click of the millionaire's shoes against the marble. Click, click, click. He moved with quiet authority, scanning rooms, opening doors just enough to let shadows escape. His presence was everywhere, and nowhere, like a predator gliding through the silence. The maid froze near the staircase, pressed against the wall. Her eyes widened as she glimpsed him through the half-open doorway of the library. He paused, adjusting his cufflinks, completely unaware of the small figure crouched just a few feet away. She exhaled silently, relief washing over her for a fleeting moment. Then, the sound of a floorboard creaking under her own foot made her stomach drop. No, 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 she thought, holding her breath, willing the noise to disappear into the mansion's vastness. He didn't turn. He hadn't noticed. She tiptoed faster now, each step calculated, her fingers brushing along the walls for balance. The envelope, pressed tightly against her chest, felt heavier than it had any right to. "Don't drop it. Don't drop it," she chanted silently. The millionaire reappeared at the end of the hallway, a glass of water in hand. He paused, surveying the grand hall with a faint frown, as if sensing the faint disturbance that lingered in the air. The maid flattened herself against the shadows of a doorway, barely daring to breathe. Her pulse thundered in her ears. He murmured, almost to himself. "I could have sworn I heard something." The words made her blood run cold. One step closer to him, and he might see. She held her breath, muscles tense, as he turned away toward the study. She moved again, each motion precise, almost a dance with disaster. A vase, an expensive, hand-painted thing, sat precariously on a side table. Her elbow brushed it lightly. No. She thought, snatching it before it could fall, heart hammering as if trying to escape her chest. Finally, she reached the hallway leading to the hidden corner, safe for now. She pressed herself against the wall, trembling, sweat beading at her hairline. Her legs felt like jelly, but her mind raced with relief and terror in equal measure. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Every shadow a threat. And somewhere in the mansion, the millionaire continued his search, completely unaware of how close he had come to discovering the secret she had fought so desperately to protect. The mansion had grown silent again, but it was a fragile silence, one that felt like it could shatter at any second. The maid crouched behind the low bookshelf, her palms pressed tightly against the envelope she had fought so hard to hide. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath shallow, each heartbeat a drum of impending doom. She had seen it, just a flicker, a subtle glance from the millionaire that had frozen her blood. He had paused mid-step in the hallway, eyes narrowing slightly at the corner where she had been moving moments before. There was no anger in his gaze, no immediate accusation, only a quiet awareness that something was amiss. Her fingers trembled. He knows. He knows, she whispered to herself, a cold sweat running down her spine. She hugged the envelope closer, wishing for the shadows to swallow her whole. The millionaire walked slowly, deliberately, along the polished marble floor. The faint click of his shoes echoed through the mansion, each step a warning. He stopped near the grand staircase and turned his head slightly, as if sensing a presence that wasn't meant to be noticed. He muttered quietly, almost to himself, the words barely more than a breath. Something's not right here. The maid's stomach twisted into knots. Her mind raced through every possible escape, every hiding place, every mistake she might have made. She could hear the faint hum of the city outside, the distant car horns, the soft chatter of vendors, but inside, the world had narrowed to this single, terrifying moment. She pressed herself flatter against the wall, closing her eyes for just a second, willing herself invisible. Just stay calm. Don't move. Don't make a sound. A bead of sweat ran down her temple as he lingered, seemingly thinking, his gaze drifting over the room, lingering on the bookshelf where her secret waited. She could almost feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath. He took a step closer to the study door, pausing as his eyes caught a faint glimmer on the floor, a shadow of movement. His brow furrowed, and he tilted his head, curiosity creeping into his expression. The maid's heart lurched violently. Every muscle in her body screamed, move. Run. But she stayed frozen, counting the seconds as they stretched endlessly. Finally, he exhaled slowly, as if deciding not to confront the disturbance just yet. Turning his attention elsewhere, he walked deeper into the mansion, leaving the maid trembling in place, caught between fear and relief. Her knees shook as she whispered again to herself, voice barely audible, that was too close, too close. I can't let him find out. And in that moment, she realized the hardest part was yet to come. The mansion had never felt smaller, yet more alive, than in that moment. The maid's hands were shaking uncontrollably as she clutched the envelope, her breath caught in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear entirely, but the millionaire was already standing before her, calm, silent, observing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He simply knelt down, bringing himself to her level, and held out a hand, not accusatory, but gentle. Give it to me, he said softly. Her mind spun. Is this a trick? Will he fire me? Call the police? Trembling, she handed the envelope over, her fingers brushing his. The paper felt impossibly heavy as it passed from her grasp. The millionaire unfolded it slowly, his eyes scanning the contents. Her heart raced, imagining the worst. Every line of elegant handwriting seemed to burn into her mind. Then, to her disbelief, he let out a soft sigh, not anger, but something else. Something warmer. You were trying to protect me, he said quietly, almost to himself. Or, protect yourself. Tears welled up in her eyes, a mix of fear, relief, and confusion. I didn't mean to. I just found it, she stammered, voice shaking. I didn't know what to do. He shook his head gently, a small, understanding smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It's all right. You were honest, in your own way. He glanced around the room, then back at her, his expression softening further. Most people wouldn't have the courage to admit a mistake, even if it was small. Her shoulders slumped in relief, the tension draining from her body as though the walls themselves were exhaling with her. The fear that had gripped her since the moment he walked in seemed to melt, leaving behind a strange, fragile trust. And, you remind me of someone I used to know, he added quietly, almost wistfully. Someone who always did what she thought was right, no matter the cost. His eyes held a hint of nostalgia, a connection she didn't yet understand. The maid blinked, stunned. Her life in the mansion, its routines, its hierarchies, its silent pressures, suddenly felt less like a cage and more like a place where understanding could exist. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said, straightening up, his voice calm, commanding, yet kind. "I see you. I understand." Her chest heaved as tears threatened to spill. The envelope, once a source of unbearable anxiety, now lay harmless in his hands. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, she allowed herself to breathe. Relief washed over her like the gentle afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows. The storm of fear and tension that had held her captive finally passed, leaving only a quiet, shimmering hope. And in that stillness, she realized that sometimes, the most shocking moments aren't about punishment, they're about unexpected understanding. The mansion, once echoing with tension and fear, now felt calm in a way that made the afternoon sunlight seem warmer, almost forgiving. The maid stood near the grand window, her hands folded nervously, watching the city below. The streets shimmered in the golden light, cars moving like tiny silver ants, children running past vendors selling fruits and snacks. Outside, life continued, oblivious to the storm that had just passed within these walls. The millionaire leaned casually against the edge of the polished staircase, watching her with a thoughtful expression. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding that made her feel, for the first time, truly seen. "You handled that well," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that was neither praise nor reprimand, but something deeper. "I know it wasn't easy. Most people would have panicked or run. But you stayed calm, careful, and honest, in your own way." She blinked, the words sinking slowly. Relief mingled with a strange pride. I was so scared," she admitted quietly. I thought I'd ruin everything. I didn't know what to do." He nodded, as if acknowledging the invisible burdens she carried. "Fear is natural. But courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. You've taught me that today. Even someone like me, with all the control, all the money. I forget that honesty and trust matter more than appearances." The maid let out a shaky laugh, the tension she had carried for hours finally dissolving. "I never expected that you'd understand. I thought," her voice trailed off, replaced by a serene silence. "You realize. Life in this house can feel like a cage, especially when people think they know your every move. Today reminded me to value the people who are honest, even when it's hard. Even when it scares them." The maid smiled faintly, letting her shoulders relax for the first time all day. "I think I understand too. That sometimes mistakes aren't the end of the world, if you're brave enough to face them." They stood together in silence for a moment, two people from very different worlds, bound by a shared understanding born from fear, honesty, and trust. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside the mansion, there was only warmth, clarity, and the quiet joy of a lesson learned. "Thank you," she whispered, not just for forgiving her, but for seeing her, really seeing her. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And thank you, for reminding me that humility and trust are worth more than all the riches in the world." The sunlight danced across the marble floors, and for a fleeting, perfect moment, everything felt right. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the distant city skyline, painting the glass towers and tiled rooftops in shades of gold and rose. From the mansion's tall windows, the streets below looked alive yet distant, people rushing past, unaware of the small dramas that unfolded behind closed doors. The hum of traffic blended with the faint chirping of birds perched on the balcony, creating a rhythm of life that felt both ordinary and profound. And yet, within the walls of that grand home, a lesson lingered, a quiet, almost invisible truth that would not be forgotten. You watched it unfold, a maid, trembling with fear, holding a secret that could have destroyed her world. A man, a millionaire, whose life seemed untouchable, learning that empathy, understanding, and trust are far more valuable than wealth or control. Pause for a moment. Take a breath. Imagine yourself in that house, in that moment. Imagine the fear, the heartbeat racing, the sweat on your brow, the weight of a choice you never expected to face. What would you do? Would you stay silent, hoping that fear could protect you? Would you act impulsively, risking everything for the chance to do what's right? Or would you find the courage, however small, to be honest, even when it terrifies you? Think about the little acts that define us, the way we handle mistakes, the way we respond when no one is watching. In a quiet room, in a fleeting moment, that choice can shape the rest of your life, and sometimes, the life of someone else entirely. The mansion is silent now, but the lessons remain. The dust on the shelves, the polished floors, the glimmering chandeliers, they reflect more than light. They reflect decisions, integrity, and the human heart's capacity for both fear and courage. And maybe that's the real question this story leaves us with. Not about riches, or secrets, or mistakes, but about ourselves. When you are faced with a moment that demands honesty, when fear presses down on your chest, when courage feels impossible, what would you do? Would you hide? Would you run? Or would you step forward, quietly, carefully, letting integrity guide your hands, your words, your heart? The choice is yours. And sometimes, the smallest act of bravery, the tiniest act of truth, is the one that changes everything. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the city, let that question linger. Let it echo in the quiet corners of your mind. And remember, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers.